Brazil drew 1-1 with Morocco at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on June 13th, and what unfolded across those 90 minutes and in the hours surrounding them revealed something about this 2026 FIFA World Cup that the official broadcast was not designed to show. Carlo Ancelotti walked into the post-match press conference with the Brazilian media already loading their questions, and a reporter asked him directly whether his squad could win the World Cup. What Ancelotti admitted at that table, what Vinicius Junior said afterward, and what thousands of supporters experienced just trying to reach the stadium is what this video covers from start to finish. By the end, three things will be clear. What the scoreline conceals about Brazil's actual performance, what Ancelotti's post-match honesty signals about where this team genuinely stands, and what unfolded outside MetLife that FIFA's cameras spent the evening pointing away from. Start with the context, because without it, the result means something smaller than it actually is. The last time the FIFA World Cup came to American soil was 1994. And the team that lifted the trophy at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena that July was Brazil. Roberto Baggio's penalty sailing into the California sky, Romario and Bebeto celebrating together in a moment of pure football joy that the sport has carried with it for 3 decades. 32 years after that, Brazil's national football team walked back onto American ground as tournament favorites, managed by the most decorated coach in European football history, with Vinicius Junior in the starting lineup, and 80,663 people packed into MetLife Stadium to witness what the 5-time world champions would produce on their return. What Brazil produced for the first 20 minutes was a performance so disorganized and passive that it looked less like a title contender and more like a team that had forgotten where it left its confidence somewhere over the Atlantic. Morocco's Atlas Lions controlled possession, pressed with an intensity that rattled the Brazilian midfield repeatedly, and created danger through quick transitions that the Seleção's defensive line simply could not contain. The opening goal arrived not through a scramble or a set-piece error, but through something considerably more damaging, a piece of finishing that announced Morocco's intentions to the entire tournament. Ismail Saibari, the PSV Eindhoven striker, collected a perfectly weighted through ball from Brahim Diaz in the 20th minute and chipped Alisson Becker with a finish that was both elegant and completely unhurried. Morocco's midfield trio of Neil El Ainaoui, Azzedine Ounahi, and Ayoub Bouadi had been outrunning their Brazilian counterparts from the first whistle, and the goal arrived as a direct consequence of that physical dominance. Brazil had one clear chance against the run of play when Vinicius reached the byline and crossed for Igor Thiago, who misjudged his header with the goal open in front of him, and that missed opportunity made the deficit feel even more deserved. 11 minutes after Saibari's goal, one moment from one player changed everything. Vinicius Junior drove an angled effort into the bottom corner in the 31st minute, his second career World Cup goal and the one that leveled the match, sending the yellow-clad end of MetLife Stadium into a noise that briefly obscured what had been a deeply uncomfortable opening half-hour. What followed across the remaining 59 minutes was a match that Brazil never truly controlled, that Morocco came within 2 saves of winning, and that Alisson Becker ultimately kept level deep into stoppage time with interventions in the 99th minute that preserved a draw Brazil will not admit how fortunate they were to secure. Brazil's unbeaten run in World Cup opening matches now stretches to 21 games, with the last opening match defeat coming against Spain back in 1934, and that 92-year streak survived last night by the thinnest margins anyone in green and gold would want to acknowledge. And this is where the press conference becomes the story within the story, because what Ancelotti told that room was not the performance of a manager trying to protect his squad from scrutiny. Nerves, he told reporters, reaching for that word to describe what had overtaken his players in the first half. Maybe the team was a bit anxious, and the nerves were all over the place, he admitted, before adding that the second half produced better football, but the difficulty never fully lifted. Ancelotti has managed Champions League finals and El Clasico matches and the kind of pressure environments that most coaches spend entire careers trying to avoid, and his diagnosis of what happened to Brazil in those opening 30 minutes carried a clinical weight that the Brazilian media inside that room understood immediately. When the most experienced manager in football tells you his players had nerves against Morocco, he is not offering an excuse. He is flagging a problem. Vinicius Junior delivered his own version of that honesty without softening it. "We started on a really bad note. No qualification, no diplomatic pivot, no mention of adjusting systems or managing the occasion. A really bad note from a man who scored the goal that prevented his team from losing." One supporter leaving MetLife after the final whistle, still dressed in his yellow Brazil shirt, offered the same verdict to a camera as he walked out. "That was a terrible performance. Terrible." That fan paid to be there, and what he paid to get there is where this story takes a different kind of turn entirely. The NJ Transit train from Penn Station in Manhattan to MetLife Stadium covers roughly 20 minutes of distance, and on any ordinary day that journey costs $12.50. On match day, for Brazil versus Morocco at the 2026 FIFA World Cup, the same train, the same seats, and the same 20 minutes cost $98, nearly 8 times the standard fare. NJ Transit announced in April that round-trip fares for World Cup matches at MetLife would reach $150, framing the surcharge as financial necessity rather than commercial opportunism. CEO Chris Kaluri put it plainly to reporters, "This isn't price gouging. We're literally trying to recoup our costs." The agency projected $62 million in total transport spending across the tournament, with outside grants covering only $14 million of that figure, and the fare increase was how they planned to close the remaining gap. None of that math, though, exists without a context that makes it considerably harder to accept. FIFA's projected revenue from the 2026 World Cup sits at $11 billion, and the amount of that $11 billion directed toward New Jersey's transport costs was zero. The organization that owns the commercial rights to the most watched sporting event on the planet contributed nothing to the $48 million in security and transport expenses the host city absorbed. $98 for a $12.50 train ride against a backdrop of $11 billion in revenue and $0 contributed to getting fans to the stadium is not a number that improves with repeated examination. For supporters who could not secure a train ticket or who attempted to drive, the day produced its own specific punishment. Temperatures near MetLife hit 87 degrees, and gridlocked traffic forced hundreds of fans to abandon their vehicles and walk more than a mile to the stadium before kickoff. One Brazilian engineer who had traveled from São Paulo described ordering an Uber to a nearby mall, a journey that should have taken 10 minutes under normal conditions, and sitting in stationary traffic for 20 minutes before stepping out of the car and covering the remaining distance on foot in the heat. 15,000 train tickets were sold for the Brazil-Morocco match out of the 40,000 seats NJ Transit had committed to for each World Cup game, meaning the vast majority of 80,663 attendees found their own way to their seats, and in 87-degree New Jersey summer heat, a great many of them earned those seats before they ever sat down in them. The football inside MetLife was genuine and at moments extraordinary, and Vinicius Junior's equalizer belongs in the category of goals this tournament will be remembered for, and Morocco's statement performance added another chapter to a story about African football that has been building in force since Qatar 2022. None of that diminishes what happened simultaneously in the parking lots and on the sidewalks outside. Both things occupied the same evening, and only one of them made the broadcast. Morocco head coach Mohamed Ouabi returned to his dressing room after the final whistle and found a room with no celebration in it. "I'm satisfied with this because when I went back to the locker room, no one was happy, no one was chanting," he told reporters. A draw against the fifth-ranked nation in the world at a World Cup group stage opener produced disappointment among the Atlas Lions, and that single detail tells you more about where African football stands in 2026 than anything a pundit could write. Achraf Hakimi orchestrated play from right back the way he has learned to at Paris Saint-Germain, and Morocco's midfield outmaneuvered a Brazilian trio that contains two Champions League winners, and the squad left East Rutherford frustrated that 3 points had not followed from a performance that merited them. That frustration is the measure of how far the Atlas Lions have traveled since they made history in Qatar as the first African team to reach a World Cup semi-final. For Brazil, Group C still runs in their favor on paper. Haiti next in Philadelphia on June 19th, then Scotland in Miami on June 24th, and the group stage should be navigable for a squad of this caliber. What a favorable schedule cannot resolve, and what Ancelotti will carry into every training session between now and that Haiti match, is the question Morocco planted on June 13th. A team overtaken by nerves against the seventh-ranked nation in the world will face nothing more forgiving in the knockout rounds, and the 92-year streak that Vinicius saved with one angled drive is not the same thing as evidence that this Brazilian team is where it needs to be. When the reporter pushed Ancelotti on how he would address the mental side of things before the next game, his answer was this: "There's a lot of pressure, so it's natural. Little by little, we'll improve in that sense." Little by little. The engineer from São Paulo, who walked a mile in 87-degree heat, watched Brazil struggle through the half-hour that nearly ended that 92-year streak, and told a camera the performance was terrible as he left, likely hopes the same thing. Little by little, the football and the experience built around the football will become what they were sold as. That is the position of the supporters. As of June 13th, it is also the position of the manager. The comment section is the place to settle a specific debate that the Morocco match opened. Whether what the Atlas Lions exposed last night represents a single rough opening game that a Brazil team of this quality corrects naturally by the time Haiti arrives, or whether the anxiety, the disorganization in midfield, and the need for an individual moment of brilliance to avoid a historic embarrassment tell you something durable about this version of the Seleção under Carlo Ancelotti. Not whether they exit the group, because they almost certainly will not. Whether they can actually win the 2026 FIFA World Cup. That is the question the Brazilian media aimed at Ancelotti in the press conference room, and it is the one worth debating here. Subscribe to follow every match and every story running beneath the results between now and the final at this same stadium on July 19th. Brazil versus Haiti, Philadelphia, June 19th, carries considerably more pressure than most people are currently treating it as carrying.